Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor right now. We've got 300 people going back and forth. The place for information and conversation. Link is right here in the description. Again, it's Off the Floor, $2.99 per month. If you click on that link and go all the way through, you will bypass the Apple upcharge. So again, this is where everybody's going. This is where you get the updates first. It's also where you can communicate with Heat fans all day long on 10 different channels. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. The big game is today. I don't think I'm allowed to say the other words. So go to Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. It is legal in the state of Florida. This is our official daily fantasy partner. Here's the other thing. We're giving away $59 in additional promo funds. So the 50 plus 59. Here's how you win that. Sign up for Prize Picks using the code 5. Also sign up for what's called Big Picks Energy. That's one of our partners. They will walk you through what plays to make. Sign up for both of those with the code 5. Have the best card on Sunday for the big game, and we're giving you an additional $59. PrizePicks.com. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode. All right, we will have a new theme song soon. Promise you that. I'm Ethan Skolnick. Here's today's floor plan.
Ethan, the people on the podcast feed will be listening to it.
Oh, that's right. They will be hearing the new one. That's Alex is editing it. So Prize Picks, again, go to that. Off the Floor, go to that. And we'll talk about our other sponsor here as we go forward. Again, I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. And from Kaseya Center, they got up bright and early this morning. I have never seen Alex awake quite this early. Alex Toledo, you can follow him at Tropical Blanket. Brady Hawk, you can follow him at Brady Hawk 305 right now. They're in the press room, and they just heard from the Heat's new players. So press conference with the Heat's 3 new additions today. Pat Riley and Erik Spoelstra were there. Before we go any further, as far as I know, Pat did not speak, correct?
No. He gave an intro where he said he was a little tired from the gala last night, but other than that, he just passed the mic to the 3 guys.
Pat,
he also added when Spo walked in, he said he's drooling when he walked in to go take the picture with the 3 defensive guys. So
I mean, you're coming from a gala which went late into the night. You say that your head coach is drooling. I don't know. We don't want to create another controversy here, but I mean, yes, I mean that would be the context is that he was getting 3 more defensive players. So Erik Spoelstra and Pat Riley were there on our Instagram, 5 Reasons Sports Instagram. You can check out some of the photos were there also on Off the Floor. But basically, Andrew Wiggins, Davion Mitchell, and as well as Kyle Anderson introduced as members of the Miami Heat. And that is kind of what they have in common, which is that they have a defensive mindset, the 3 of them. We should also say, just for, again, context, Jimmy Butler, who was traded for these 3 players, made his debut with the Golden State Warriors last night. And actually, it wasn't going so well at first. He had 8 points at the half, was only 2 of 6 from the field, but he finished with 25, 11 from the free throw line, as Steph Curry went absolutely nuts in the third quarter, and they turned a 20-something point deficit into a 20-something point win in Chicago. There was a 56-15 run by the Warriors in that game last night. So obviously the Warriors, at least for one night, are happy with what they acquired. Alex, should the Heat, based on what you heard today, be happy with what they acquired?
I think they are. Like, obviously nobody wanted the situation to go this way in the first place, but we were talking, after it was over with, Wes Goldberg from Locked On and Alex Solano from the Heat broadcast, and we're telling them like all 3 of those guys feel like Heat guys. It feels like those guys are all hard workers. When you look at like their play style, the way that they all are like strong defenders, just in general, their skill sets. And even their personalities that we kind of saw, the differences there, they all kind of feel like Heat guys. I think Davion, he was, in my opinion, the best talker of the 3, at least today. He seemed kind of excited to speak. Wiggins, it felt more like he's just not like, he's not going to give you a great quote, right? But he seems like a nice, chill guy. And I think Kyle Anderson was kind of in the middle there as far as like the energy, as opposed to Wiggins and Mitchell. I think all 3 are Heat guys. I think all of them are guys that they're going to need in their rotation at some point, and maybe all 3 are not right away. But like I was saying on the last podcast that I did here with Brady, I think Kyle Anderson is a sneaky guy that Spo might play with the size, the instincts that he offers on both ends of the floor. I I think Davion Mitchell, for obvious reasons, a point of attack defense. Everybody has been pointing that out like it's an obvious need. And of course, Wiggins and what he brings in the starting lineup, the significant offensive upgrade over Highsmith. I think all those things are necessary. And I think not only that, just like the emotional aspect of it, where like they can finally move on, and the money that was being allocated to their superstar is now being allocated to 3 other players as opposed to nothing at all, right? Like they were getting nothing from that for a while because of the suspensions and because of everything going on. So I think Spo must be extremely excited, going from a situation where he couldn't even say his star's name for weeks, right? To now it's finally over. It is what it is. Move on. And they all feel like Heat guys. They don't feel like, okay, we just took these guys to make the money work. And, to some degree it was a part of it, right? But they all feel like they can fit in right away into what they do.
I'm glad that you sort of characterize this as the 3 different personalities, because I do think there's something to that. It feels like, again, Andrew Wiggins is known to kind of be a quiet guy who everybody sort of loves in the locker room, but he's not outspoken. He is the anti-Jimmy in a lot of different ways, just in terms of the way he handles.
I'm sure he'd love that.
Well, and look, it's not the first time. I've reported that on the night that they drafted Bam, that a longtime Heat official who actually did some of the due diligence on Bam said that they did more research on him than any other player. The first thing he said was he's the anti-Hassan. So it's not the first time that they've gone in a direction to when they've had a player who has been problematic for one reason or another, and they've kind of looked for a player who's totally different. That's one of the very first things when I spoke to someone with the Heat after the trades were made, and they said, these guys all fit us and they fit our young group. And so I think personality does matter in this case. It seems like Mitchell is the most kind of, I don't know, extroverted of the 3. And Wiggins is the most introverted, as you mentioned. I think Kyle Anderson is somewhere in between. I want to get to the Kyle Anderson part of this, Brady, because we probably should do more on him. I think that we didn't do more on him at the very beginning. Of course, he's known as Slow-Mo. He owns the nickname. He is one of the slowest moving players in the league, who is still effective at the same time. But I think we didn't focus on him a ton at the beginning, in part because we didn't think he was going to be here. The Heat were still – they had moved him originally to Toronto. They had another – I just want to be clear on something with that too. The Heat are not upset with the Raptors. Apparently, Masai, their general manager, Masai Ujiri, made it very clear to them he was working on this Atlanta deal at the same time. This New Orleans deal. And if that ended up hitting, then he wasn't going to be able to take on Kyle Anderson's contract. So they knew the situation. They still did investigate moving him after that, as they were trying to work the sort of the tax and apron angles. But at the same time, I know for a fact there were people in the Heat's basketball operations who were like, we really like to keep this guy. So now that they've kept him, Brady, what do you see his role?
That's the hardest part, is the role part, because I really don't know. I mean, we can go down the line. We could probably, I keep saying we should do a whole podcast on what we think the rotation will look like eventually here, because I put it this way. Like, if the Heat were playing a Game 7 tomorrow night against Boston, Kyle Anderson would probably be in the rotation. But is he going to play in front of some of these young guys that they've kind of moved this season in the direction of trying to find the youth, find the upside, find the future? So I don't think you take minutes away from those guys. So that's where this gets interesting. Defensively, I think he's an interesting player just because he could size up. He has the wing potential just to guard bigger players, and he could just – it's just a different body than they've been used to, because they've been undersized or they've been big. That's kind of the new version of this team, and they kind of have a tweener here that can kind of move around the board a little bit defensively. Offensively, it's really interesting because he's not a great shooter. He's not somebody you're going to put on the wings and tell him just take a bunch of catch and shoot shots, but he's somebody that can play in the short roll. He's somebody that can play in the mid post. He's a really good playmaker. I think the word you're going to hear Spo use constantly when talking about Kyle Anderson is connector. He's going to say he's a great connector, because that's what he is. He's just a really good piece to put in the offense that can kind of just connect certain guys and be that kind of piece moving around. And I'll say this, my favorite thing about the Kyle Anderson acquisition is what he may do for Jaime Jaquez. I really do believe that. I think he's going to be a really good influence on him. I think just the things that Jaime's good at, like they're going to operate in similar spots. And mid post, the things I just mentioned, mid post, they'll run a couple pick and rolls. They're the guys that can play the short roll. But one thing that Kyle Anderson has that Jaime has to develop is the playmaking part of this, is having that vision and making quick decisions and making certain passes that Kyle Anderson's really good at.
And slowing down.
That too, because Jaime's playing at an insane speed 24/7, which is good in certain ways, but also not good in other ways, because I think it's catching up to him a little bit where that fast pace is kind of defense or kind of game planning for it. So I'm interested in that. I really am. I think Kyle Anderson, could really be a good influence to kind of like find the different parts of the game, the playmaking aspect and all of that. I don't think you're going to be seeing many Jaime Kyle Anderson minutes together just because of the shooting factor. Like, it's just something. And that's why I mentioned the fact of what do you want to lean into, because I'll be honest, like if they're going to win a game and they're going to shrink down to a 7-8 man rotation tomorrow, Kyle Anderson plays over Jaime Jaquez probably right now.
Maybe it's because I'm watching Severance, but I kind of getting this idea of like the two of them merging. I'm not going to give away big time spoilers, but I'm kind of getting the idea of reintegration and the two personalities merging, where you get a little of Jaime's speed with a little of Kyle's slow-mo and all the rest of this, and you actually have one player that you can play more often. I do think that Spo is going to play him. I think you're right. I think there's going to be a balance here of leaning into the young players, which is where they're going, but then also playing somebody he's going to trust. There's a history of connectors, so to speak, working well with the Heat. We could do a podcast on that. Kind of the first one in the late 90s. This is before you guys were watching a whole bunch. But Dan Marley kind of fit that at an advanced age. Dan Marley fit that for the Heat. But Shane Battier was the one that I would look at during the Big Three era, that better shooter than Kyle Anderson, but similar in the fact that Shane, just when you put him on the floor with other players, he made those other players better because he did the other things. He got them the ball in the right spots. And by the way, Shane wasn't real fast either. Okay. So there are some comparisons, and I can see Spo using him in some ways the way he used Shane. I want to devote the second half of the episode to Wiggins. So let's just get into Mitchell here real quick. Alex, we talk about him being a defender. Do you see any possibility where he emerges as a starter next to Tyler Hero?
I mean, I guess it's a possibility. I wouldn't expect it. I think it seems, like the Bam and Ware thing seems like firmly where they're at right now, like as far as with their starting lineup and with their identity, they're playing into it. Maybe that changes at some point. I'm not really expecting that. And so right now I'm not really expecting Mitchell to start because of Wiggins. I think they're going to keep Tyler and Duncan there. I don't see why, they would take one of them out. But I mean, not that there isn't, a case for, like, if you really want to lean into the defensive aspect and just be like, we're not scoring anyways, let's just play an extra defender there and have Duncan as like our bench shot creator, because we don't really trust Terry and Jaime to do that consistently. Yeah, you can make a case for it. I'm just not really expecting that. I think it's going to be Tyler, Duncan, Wiggins as the 1, 2, and 3, kind of as we've been talking about. But I think they're going to love Mitchell. I think he's going to be kind of put into the same role that Drew Smith was. And I think even though we all kind of thought that Drew Smith would be starting at this point, now they've got Wiggins. And I think they're going to have Wiggins play, kind of that point of attack stuff. And I know that he is like a great isolation defender. He's a very good help defender, weak side, rim protector occasionally. They're going to have him navigating a lot of screens. And he's already, used to guarding the other team's best player. That's not a new thing for him. So he's very, I think he has the proper resume there for that role. But he's going to sometimes have to guard like the other team's best guards if it's not a wing. I think he's going to be put in that same position that Haywood has been in, where maybe Wiggins hasn't always had to guard the guards on, when it comes to Warriors. They had like Gary Payton there, and they had other, just guys who can help do that job. The Heat, they kind of need Wiggins to do that job in that starting lineup. They need him to guard the point of attack, and I hope we see less of like Tyler and Duncan guarding those guys. Of course, they're going to be put in actions. I'm not trying to shade them, but I think the idea here is that, Wiggins takes up the Haywood role defensively, and then you get the offensive upgrade there. And with Mitchell, he's going to be in there. He's going to be in there. And by the way, I know you didn't ask me about Kyle Anderson. I'm just rambling at this point. I got to get better at that. But you mentioned like roles and past Heat players and roles that he could be put in. The one that I mentioned on the last show was PJ Tucker, where I think PJ was one guy where, he had his limitations, but he was very good when you put him in certain spots, and he wasn't just like a spot up guy where that wasn't necessarily his best strength, even though he was good in the corners and all that, whatever. They're going to use him a lot, I think, as a screener off of the actions with their shooters, whether it's Tyler and Duncan. I think, those guys are going to draw too. They're going to kick it to Anderson for the short roll, and he's either going to, feed the big if the defensive big comes to step up, or he's going to take that little floater. And the slow-mo stuff helps him when it comes to some of the finishing, right? I think since he's playing so slow and under control, he's never really taking shots like sometimes you see with Jaime when he's playing so fast where, he's kind of out of control and it's hard to finish like that. With slow-mo, he's taking these slow, deliberate steps. Like his Euro step is kind of lethal in a way because it's like you don't know how to time it, right? If you're a defender trying to time it and it's this huge, strong guy taking it right over you, like it's really tough to defend. You got to time it and contest it. And he's got these size things that make it hard to do. He's also a smart passer, so you're anticipating that first. If you're a defender, I think they're going to take advantage of that. I think they the connector thing is accurate, and they're going to use him in those ways where he's going to come out with those, facilitate those actions with the shooters, and he's going to just make the right read out of it. I think Spo is going to really like that, and on the defensive end, he's really versatile. Like he's not an on-ball point of attack guy, but he's an awesome helper and a very good, just in general, front court defender. He can guard, I think, between 3s to 5s, occasionally 5s. Like we saw him in past playoff series matchup against, Jokic at times, not primarily, but like the guy offers you a lot of versatility on that. And I think he very much feels like a Spo guy, and they all kind of do.
All right, we're going to get to Wiggins here on the other side. We do want to mention another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at Water Cleanup. You can find them in Boca Raton, but they service the entire Tri-County area. They cover you every step of the way. If you got a leak in your home or your place of business, Water Cleanup of Florida is who you want to reach out to. Michael Robert and his team, huge Miami Heat fans, as well as pretty much all of our sponsors. They handle the preventative maintenance all the way up through the damage assessment. They can work with you with your insurance company as well. So check them out. It's Water Cleanup of Florida, more than 100 5-star reviews on Google. You can find them at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you've got the schmutz, they got the guts. All right, the core piece of this, though, the one that's going to be talked about the most is Wiggins, Brady, and he is a different player than Jimmy. It's been interesting to follow Golden State fans as they've sort of lamented losing Wiggins as a human being in a lot of different ways, and also for the role that he contributed to the championship, which was interesting because, again, Wiggins, and there's a great story on our website right now. Check it out at 5reasonsports.com from our guy Gio Valdez, talking about kind of this transformation of Andrew Wiggins from the number 1 overall pick, who was expected to be the next LeBron. He wasn't that. Was kind of considered to be sort of one-dimensional offensively, didn't rebound, all the rest of that, didn't really lean into his athleticism on defense. And then it just all blossomed that one year as a high-end role player in Golden State and helping them win a championship. But now he's going to be expected, I think, to do more, right? Like this is not a role player role here in Miami. Like this is a guy they're going to be counting on to give you, 20 points on a pretty regular basis, one way or the other. Is that something you think? Because the defense is there. I think he's shown he can do that. How much can he help them offensively, Brady?
Big time. I when I talked about Kyle Anderson before, and I mentioned like the specific things he can do in the specific role, I think it's the exact opposite for Andrew Wiggins. I don't think they put him in any role. I think they let him play freely. I think they let him, the Warriors. He played free with the Warriors. I don't want to say it like that because he plays in a similar system. But I don't think it's going to be as often that he's off the catch, catch and goes and all that stuff where it's secondary actions. I think he's going to be a primary action guy for a good bit with this team. I think Tyler needs it. I think what we've seen on this previous road trip is that these primary actions with Tyler is catching up to him a little bit where it's there's almost a fatigue kicking in because there's so much attention, so much drawing out of doubles, so much attacking and driving where early in the season it was a lot off the catch. And it's just it's tougher to get those shots where as much as we talked about what Jimmy's regular season looked like before he was traded, he took pressure off Tyler. He was somebody that got the ball out of his hands and put pressure on the rim and got paint touches and allowed him to play that style. Whereas I think Andrew Wiggins is going to be running a bunch of pick and rolls. I think he's going to play off the catch as well. He was shooting 40% on catch and shoot threes this season. So, I mean, that's going to help in itself. But they just need somebody to get to the basket that can draw paint, draw a couple defenders, and kick out. They just haven't had that. So I'll say I just think they have to play freely. I don't think they put him in any role. I really do believe that. I think they have to see what they have here. It's interesting because he is so versatile. I know, like, you hear that word and Spo uses it and says about like moving him around offensively, but he really is. Like, I don't picture a specific thing with him. Like, I kind of do see him having to play fast with the young guys. I think there's certain lineups, and I think that's another probably topic we could do. It's like different lineups that I think favor some of these guys. Like Davion's a guy where you were talking about not starting him. Well, if you don't start him, are you playing with Terry? Because that's kind of the situation you're going to put yourself in. Where I think Spo's not going to not play Terry. Okay, so what you're pretty much saying to yourself is, I think it's not crazy to say Davion could end up starting because it moves the pieces in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
It puts Davion in the starting lineup. You could bring Duncan off the bench and have a little bit of a spark and a trigger off the bench. Terry's still going to get his minutes and you play a certain style. So I don't think that's crazy to eventually get to because look, at the beginning, don't be surprised. You know, you mentioned him playing a Drew Smith style. Drew Smith saw minutes with Terry Rozier. So it's like,
yeah,
loves to play a lot of guards together anyway. So.
And maybe they can get away with it with playing other bigs now. Like if they could counter the small lineup with bigs in the front court, I don't know. I'm not going to be a big fan of that lineup, but it's just interesting because I think Wiggins is easier to place around is kind of my overall point.
Well, Brady, I just don't like, and I know a lot of fans don't like these lineups now where he goes 2 bigs and 3 guards. It's like, right. Okay, now we've forgotten about having forwards. It reminds me of playing what was it, Lowry and Hero, and I can't remember who was the third at that time. Like playing all the guards. Yeah, Gabe Vincent, right? Playing all the guards together never seems like the right way to go. I look.
Except now they do it with Terry, Tyler, and Duncan, for example.
Right, but now they might do it with Terry, Tyler, and Davion also, which that's not. He will though. He will, and I'm looking at the rows.
He doesn't need to anymore. He's got Wiggins and Anderson. Like he's got wings. He's got his bigs. You know, like
I know, but the mad scientist in him, you know, there's going to be a little bit of that. Well, we can get away with this because we got Ware and Bam back there, so let's not play any of our forwards. That may end up happening here. I do need to close this one out though because we've got a bunch of big game stuff to get to. I want to mention the contest too. Again, you sign up for Prize Picks using the code 5. Big Picks Energy using the code 5. Alex, as you just from your perception, just give me your sort of your general thoughts about Wiggins today, and what should the expectation level be of him, and then we'll close.
You know, like we mentioned earlier, I don't think he said much interesting. You know, it's just honestly, I'm just being real about it. Like I wasn't expecting much to begin with. But just as far as his play style, like what you guys were just talking about with the offense stuff, that's where I'm really intrigued because I think there has to be some sort of middle ground in between the Golden State Wiggins and the Minnesota Wiggins, where you want a little bit more of what he gave you on the offensive side from the Minnesota stint. And of course, they need what he brings on the defensive end and of course, like the playing off the catch, like I think that's still going to be utilized for sure. But the offensive stuff where it's like, okay, he can give you paint touches. He can give you a couple of middies per game, which he does take, by the way. I wonder if that's going to be like something they try to phase out or not. I don't know if they will. I think that having that as like a counter for when the paint touches are, you know, the paint is kind of crowded for him. I think it's fine. He seems pretty comfortable there. I've never been against the midi as a counter, more as like if that's going to be the one thing you rely on if you're not a lead on it. So I think it's a good thing for them to have a guy who can help, you know, get some paint touches because that's what they're really going to miss with Jimmy. You can't expect Wiggins to take up the Jimmy role in the sense of like the free throw line stuff, but you need him. You absolutely need him to give you paint touches. You don't need a 25% usage, but you need him to be able to get paint touches and not only off the catch where he's very good at it and can do like a straight line drive and you know, dunk on somebody, for example. Because he's honestly, the past 2 seasons, he hasn't been a great finisher at the rim. So right. I think there's a little bit of an onus on him to be a little bit better. Get to the paint, finish when need be, and other times just make the right play. I think they need the offensive punch from him. And sometimes that was a complaint with Warriors fans. It's like, oh, this guy used to average you know, however many points, and he used to be a first or second option on offense. And sometimes you don't even feel him with the role that he was in the Warriors, even with how high impact of a player he could be. I think they need him to be more than that. They need him to be a scoring threat. They're not going to run the offense around him, but like Brady said, there's going to be some pick and rolls. There's going to be some times where Tyler's not on the floor, and they need him to get there. And maybe it's a little bit easier to do when you're playing a shooting big with either Bam or Ware, and it's not quite as crowded. Like I think there's space for that, and they're going to need that. They need to make up some of that offense that they lost with Jimmy. No,
I'm with you on it. I did see Warriors fans who said, well, sometimes he was allergic to the rim, and that's something that they got to get away from this time. I will have more coverage on this going forward. Again, sign up for our contest. Thanks for Alex and Brady for getting up early and handling this today. Check out the coverage on Off the Floor as well. And yes, we will have our theme song going up there pretty soon. I know he's working on another one too that includes these players, so we'll get to that as well. All right, thanks everybody. Check it out on our feed, obviously, and also subscribe to the NBA 5 Reasons feed too if you want coverage from around the NBA.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.
All right.